Yeah, all set. Cool. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining the meetup that's happening today. We will be talking about, like you can see the title on the page, why release plans fail and what do we do about it, right? So, this entire session is going to be pretty hands-on. We will collaborate on a use case and see how we plan for a delivery plan without really factoring a lot of things that could potentially derail our release plan, and then just hear views from one another as to what do we think we could do about it. So we will reveal a few factors and variables associated with it. So yeah, let's get started without further ado. Today's topic came from patterns that I have seen in some of the projects that I've worked on quite repeatedly. Usually teams put together a very optimistic release plan, and then we see that it falls apart. Not every time, but maybe sometimes we do see that dates slip and things don't really work out. Um, I think the most interesting part when we look at it is not just that we estimated things wrong. It's not that we didn't factor in the amount of work, but there are several factors that impact this, right? And today we will be talking about some of those factors. So yeah, let's explore those things in a little more depth. But before we go ahead, I would like to talk about the company that we come from and what does this organization do and what's the scale at which we operate. So Fabric is a fully established service technology consultancy, and we are currently based out of headquartered at Melbourne, which is obviously Australia, but we are also operating out of a lot of different regions. So we have people working for Fabric from India. Obviously, you see a lot of colleagues, including me and a few folks who are based out of here working remotely. But their presence is also in Philippines, China, as well as some of the other regions which we'll see in a bit. We are about 120 plus employee company, and we are working for a lot of different strategic digital solutions for clients across the globe. We have been a very strong partner for our clients, and we hear quite good testimonies about the same thing. So yeah, I think it's a great place to work. And to know more about the opportunities here, you'll see that in a few slides that are coming up. So like I was talking about the different regions that we operate out of, we are headquartered at Melbourne within Australia, but we also have people working from different parts of the world, like China, Philippines, Singapore, as well as India. So that's just a little bit about the company that we come from. And here's a bit of an intro about myself. So currently I'm working as a delivery lead in Fabric. I have worked with clients across a lot of different domains, coming from public sector, BFSI, as well as telecom. I have majorly led digital transformation initiatives for our clients and built a lot of release plans. I have seen release plans succeed, I've seen them slip, and I've also seen some of them recover. But yeah, unfortunately, there are some that completely fall apart, and we'll today see why and how can we revert that. If you want to get in touch with me, here's my QR code, and we can connect on LinkedIn. Now, let's move on to one more disclaimer that I'd like to share before we get started. I am not going to talk about a framework here, which is, a perfect solution of how to build a release plan. I am only here to share my experience as to what I think has worked for me and something that, we can create a shared understanding about. These are simply patterns that I have observed across different projects. So yeah, obviously we are here to learn from each other. If you think there's something that has worked for you, feel free to share that with the group. All right, moving on and trying to understand the audience a little bit. Who do we have in the room? This is primarily important because we'll be busting a myth which is surrounded around release plans very soon. And I'd just like to first know my audience. So how many developers do we have here in the room? Cool, all right, quite a few. QA engineers. Okay, great. Business analysts. Okay, all right. I was a business analyst myself some time ago. Product managers, I think BAs and product managers, they play quite overlapping roles. Um, Architects, I think Anuj is another architect that I know, and delivery lead, that's the current me now. So it's good to know that people here are coming from different backgrounds. I think this already sets the tone for the workshop because all the people here, I believe, want to learn about release planning. And the myth that surrounds release planning is that it's only important for certain roles like delivery managers or business analyst, but that's not true. So the fact that you folks are sitting here kind of proves it otherwise. So yeah, with that, I'll move on to the next part, which is what is release planning, right? How do we define it? So there's no one definition of release planning. And when I ask people what is their definition of release plan, I often hear it's a date as to when we think a project will complete, right? That's typically what we hear. But I honestly think it's much more than that. Release plans are effectively trying to understand what we aim to build, how are we building it, and most importantly, what are the assumptions that we are making around it. So I would say release plan is a way of achieving a goal with a set assumptions about reality of the situation. So that's effectively what a release plan in my mind is. But I'd just like to hear from the people here, what do they think, what is their idea of release planning? Anyone would like to take a stab at it?
Like it could be a feature delivery or product delivery, whatever it is. And it should be finely distributed in blocks. And those blocks are released. You can have like a bi-weekly or whatever the release plan cycles are. And if those blocks are delivery, it could be a successful release plan or overall.
Yep.
And if it is like delay, you can have like assumptions like how much your release is going to be delayed.
Yep.
Uh, in every of that release cycles only.
Right. That is a great way of putting that together, and I feel that totally resonates with the idea that I have about release plans as well. I think it's one of the factors that goes into building a release plan, which is sequencing the work in the right order, so you can have incremental releases. That's a great point. Thank you for adding that. All right, moving on to why do we need release plans and why it's important, right? So they are valuable because they help create a shared agreement and alignment with the clients as to, okay, this is the scope that we're trying to build, and this is the scope of work. Usually, that's where I see most amount of alignment is not, we are not able to meet that. The reason being there are scope creeps that we identify, there are dependencies that we are not able to understand at the very beginning, and there are also risks that we don't bake into the plans. So it's a good time at the very early stage of the project to create a shared understanding of what the scope is, what is it that we are trying to solve, create that alignment with our clients, understand the trade-offs like scope, time, what do we think can be traded off, and also helps us have those difficult conversations at the very start rather than having them at a later point when things are falling apart or very close to that. So yeah, I think that's effectively why we need release plans and why it's really, really important that every project at its inception does this. All right. So I come back to this $1 million question, which is who should participate in release planning? I just want to hear maybe quick shouts about roles and groups of people who we think should be a part of release plans based on your experience or just, the thoughts that you've heard so far. Any thoughts? Yes. Yeah, show him.
Not in terms of rules, but generally in terms of, I would say, somebody from business side. First of all, the audience should be limited. It's not, it shouldn't be across the team or wider group. But somebody from the business side, tech team, QA team, and then infra team as well. So important stakeholders which are taking care of different areas of the project or the product that you're working on. So sort of presentation, representation of each group.
Correct.
That's something is bare minimum needed for every release plan discussion.
Yeah, that's a great take. Anyone else would like to add to
Yeah,
that?
means all the business owners are there. The feature which was requested by the business owner, then also the release manager, the product manager, the project managers, then the EA lead who will be taking the UAT sign off, or who will be uh, who will be there for responsible for the UAT planning and all. And then obviously the respective squads project manager, or you can say business analyst, which has a say and which has a scope fulfillment of the releases. So
That's a great, those are like really good takes. I was expecting to hear only DLs need to be there or only my PM needs to be there. But what I'm hearing is a lot of crucial roles that come out of it. Like you mentioned product owners, you mentioned people who understand the scope better. I think Shoaib, you mentioned, identification or representation from different domains like quality engineers, infra people. So I think all of these are great inputs, and effectively that's what my answer is as well. I think all roles are important to participate in the building of a release plan, right? So developers, they play a very unique role as to helping with technical sequencing, right? I think you mentioned early on that having an idea about how things can be sequenced technically so that we can have independent and incremental release cycles. That's the perspective that a developer can share. Yeah.
Not all developers, like because if we have a bunch of developers, it will be like mess at that point, because every developer will come up with a different plan. It should be like the technical leader on that particular domains, basically, like the backend or whatever the things are going to be there.
Yep.
Like,
Agreed. I think this is talking about the roles,
yeah.
and I think, like Shoaib mentioned, right, representation from a role is very important. So, totally agreed. If we have too many people, sometimes that might prove to be counterproductive. So, I think somebody who's a decision maker who understands what is it that we're trying to solve and how we're trying to solve it, that is very, very crucial. But in my opinion, even if I've had senior devs like 2 or 3 coming together and working, who are in sync about the problem statement and understand what they need to achieve and how, it's usually not a problem. In fact, it gives me more pointers as to, okay, whether we are estimating the things in the right manner or not. So if we are taking an epic, if I get a more aligned estimation, like the lead could say it's a 3-pointer, but the work has to be done by a bunch of developers, right? And they come and argue about, okay, it cannot be a 3-point. I think it's a 5, for example. So those kinds of inputs, again, that doesn't directly bake into the release plan, because estimations is something that you would do as a prerequisite before your release plan is getting made. And given the topic is specifically about that, I do agree with you. I think having a lead could suffice, but the prerequisites, which is having the backlog of work estimated, prioritized, I think even if you have senior developers, it has worked well in my experience. So, yes,
So you talked about prioritization, right?
right.
So where do you put prioritization? Is it part of the release planning? Because at some point of time you want to do that. It cannot be a prerequisite to it, because while it can also be over there, but as per you, where should it lie? When, at what stage of my entire life cycle should I be prioritizing what gets picked when?
That's a very interesting question, and I feel that deserves a meetup topic of its own because prioritization in itself is a huge beast. But I'll try to take a stab at it. Prioritization cannot happen at one point and stop after that. It has to keep happening time and again. The first round of prioritization happens usually when you're either doing a discovery or an inception. The output of that is a product backlog, which is a set of stories or tasks which define the scope of work. Then you have a round of prioritization on what the product backlog looks like, what the sequencing of that is. And typically the framework that we use is doing a relative comparison of the items there. That's one point. But every time that product backlogs get converted into a sprint backlog, you have to do a round of prioritization again as to within a sprint, what do we pick up, what do we solve for, what are the most important bits, so on and so forth. So I feel like it is never a one-time activity, but it's a sequence of, I would say it's a repeated set of activities that you need to keep doing at different points in time.
So, but when we think of release planning, I basically, something should be my source of truth to kind of start with, right?
Correct.
Something is the starting point for me. That is after the backlog, whatever prioritization I have, based on that, I create my release plan.
Correct. Yes. So if you're only talking about the point of creation of a release plan, yes, the prerequisite for that I would say is a prioritized product backlog.
And also the business inputs plays a role because suppose if there is any festive season or any of the competitor is launching some product, then whatever the feature are prioritized, it can get reshuffle and then assigned a new priority and then it is assigned to the particular releases.
Correct. Yep. I think it depends on when you're starting the project as well. Like in my experience, if it's going to be a product that is festive, that is appealed by a lot of masses, then I'll potentially try to release an MVP which has the checkout and payment checkout kind of a thing end to end rather than a subscription model, which might be important to me in the off season when the product isn't selling much, right? So I think yes, there are decisions that we need to factor in, and prioritization is an exercise which happens together with the product owners and our clients. So like I said, estimations, prioritization, these are topics that deserve their own meetup sessions. They're pretty intense topics in themselves, but thanks for clarifying that, Anuj, as to the assumption we are making while doing a release plan. And yeah, with that, I'll move on. This was pretty good. I've just highlighted a few roles and the reasons as to why we think representation from those roles are important during our release plan exercise. So, cool. Moving on with another question. Raise your hand if you've seen a release plan fail.
Not even fail, but
Derail,
derail and sort of
slip.
recalibrated, so as
Correct.
to say.
Yeah. Can you tell me what are some factors that were very evident while that happened?
So, scope creep is one. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, can we get the mic, please?
Yeah. So scope creep is one. The changing priorities are the other part. I mean, then the customer feedbacks that you get. Suddenly you come up with, you already have a scope planned for for a sprint, for example, and then customer feedbacks, the request for hot fixes, and many other things that come up, right? And they can basically derail the whole thing. Either you end up delaying the deployments or you shrink the scope, or there is a trade-off that you need to take care of.
Correct.
So that's what can derail your release plan.
Great. I think you already covered a few factors that I'm going to talk about in detail. So,
I mean, that's the current problem I'm facing actively. So
okay, cool. Anyone else would like to take a stab at it as to why? Anuj, maybe do you want to? Yeah, please go ahead.
Maybe sometimes the high priority item comes means someone from the very high level from the management or from the business side comes and says that okay, we want this feature and we want all the UAT team to focus on this rather than the usual in scope items.
Yeah.
So that is one of the reason which delays the release plan or delays the release. And also we the UAT team is not much satisfied with the defect resolution. So if there are more than defect counts and we are not resolving it on time, so it can also delay the releases.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, those are some.
Yeah. Also, in my opinion, I have faced this where the problem was the alignment with actual stakeholders, right? There's a project team. They did everything. They made the plan, right? They started working on it, and when the time comes to kind of showcase and get that feedback,
Yeah.
it seemed like the stakeholders were not aligned with the
Yeah, they're
idea
like,
that
what have you built? We never
yeah,
asked for this.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So that alignment and setting out those proper RNRs and RACI matrices is very important in my opinion, because I've seen a lot of things go south when people who are actually at the point of kind of taking a decision are not aligned with what you are working on.
Yeah, that's a very strong. Yes, I think someone at the back also has an input.
I'll just look at it from the developer's perspective, right? Like, because I'm one of them. So most of the things that I have seen, right? Like while planning, we miss out on a lot of complexities upfront, like some of the very obvious uh, issues that like issues or the complex problems that we miss out. So So discoveries and all those things take time, and not spending enough time in understanding what those problems, how much time that can cause, and all those things can derail everything. Because then on the go, you need to do a lot of discoveries, and there like those things may be the most critical part of your application, and then you don't have any solution for them, and your project is completely bust. So those things can happen, and that is one of the things which I have faced in my development
That's a
work.
great call out.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like you just summarized the need for discovery and inception before a project kickstarts. And I think Anuj, you brought up another great point about stakeholder misalignment. So you
And like
folks,
some delays are happens
yeah,
due to like not just like the technical complexities.
right.
It is like technical constraints also, and sometimes we have to deal with those constraints. The possibilities are like we want some feature which is in gray lines with those constraints, and those times like we cannot even identify the complexities at time.
Correct.
It may or may not be like it will be one go.
Yeah.
It may not go in 10 times also.
Exactly. Yep.
So those are like unseen, and we know those things, but we cannot predict on like it will take like 2 days. It may take 1 week also.
Exactly. That's a great point. That's a uncertainty which we might know at the start of the planning, but there are times when we assume that it's going to work out and we move on. But it's really important to bake in some sort of buffer in the plan if we know that there might be an unforeseen uncertainty that might get introduced. Then there's always that buffer that you do, consider in the plan. So that's not something that we will talk about in detail, but really good point, I think, brought up by you. So pretty much you folks summed up this slide instead of me. I don't have to talk much because you all talked in detail about it.
I think it felt like you created via AI based on the discussion over here.
Yeah, I might have just done
Yeah.
that. So this
Please
is
use
great
AI
stuff.
to generate it.
Maybe there's going to be some technology like that soon.
So one thing,
I'm
like
just kidding.
I'm not sure if I've ever seen a release plan actually fail, because usually what I've seen is we end up making subtle adjustments and recalibrate everything. I've never seen I've never came across a situation wherein we as a team call it a failure of a release plan. So I'm not sure about that, but yeah, in my experience at least.
Some good planners you have. Good TS.
That means you have a really strong team.
But
Usually
generally, I agree to that point to a bit, because generally, what we tend to do is we pivot, we either change the plan, we reduce our scope, or do something of that sort. But essentially, the idea is it's not the entire release plan as release planning we are failing, but we are failing in the first go, right? The
Yep.
first initial plan that we had,
Correct.
are we always able to meet that plan
Correct.
in one go,
Yep.
right? The initial
Yes.
objective and the initial plan that we had, we obviously at some point of time would have to detour, change our plan and things like that.
Correct.
So how?
And I think if you create a solid release plan, that shouldn't happen. Like maybe even if it happens, nothing is inevitable. But even if that happens, that should happen to the minimum degree. So, and how do we do our best to ensure that it doesn't slip, or we don't have to pivot the whole strategy or direction? But yeah, I think this is great stuff. Hello, hello, hello. Yeah. So I think we summed it up during our conversations about a lot of different reasons as to why it could fail. And some of you have not seen it fail completely, but seen it slip. So thanks for adding all your inputs, folks. I'll move on to the next one, right? Which is a myth about how release plans fail because of bad estimates. But in reality, it is not only the estimates that actually derail a release plan. It is things that we did not plan for. Like you were talking about uncertainties, right? Things that we didn't really see through, even when we had that information, or we didn't account for that in our release plan. Then those are factors that we should consider early on, and there are ways in which we can do that. All right. So before we proceed, this is the second part of our session. All the theory is now behind us, and I hope you folks understand the importance of release plan and what it is. And going forward now, from here on, we will talk about things doing it practically. So there's a use case that we have prepared, which I'll read out in a bit. What we want to do is, together with you all, we'll break the folks here in 2 groups, and together with the people here, we will create 2 separate release plans on these very boards. So let me first take a little bit of time and introduce the use case here. The problem statement is that Leatherco is a company that wants to take its products online. Now, what is Leatherco? Leatherco is a homegrown leather bags and footwear brand, and it has grown through boutiques, exhibitions, and just organic sales, word of mouth sort of a thing. Now their demand is increasing more than ever because they are providing very high quality products to their customers. And the need for them to service outside Maharashtra is growing. But their rudimentary way of tracking sales or managing their orders or even making payments is not really working out very well for them. So what they want to do is build an e-commerce platform, and that's what they've reached to us, which is Fabric, to help us build that. Before we can start the project, we have to build a release plan, obviously, and there are some assumptions that we are making in the creation of this. First of all, it's a greenfield project, right? So we are starting from scratch. We don't have anything built prior to this. Majority of the discovery sessions are complete. So let's assume that we've already had a series of sessions with our clients and we've understood their problem statement. We know what they are after. And they've also shared a prioritized product backlog with us. Obviously, our BAs have worked together to sort of churn that out. So you will be receiving envelopes with the different items within our product backlog very shortly, which are also estimated. So yeah, I think we'll start with the division. We'll figure out what groups should be like. We'll keep a mix of different roles. And now talking about what you'll do together, you'll effectively build a high-level release plan. Again, this example is very rudimentary. It doesn't contain all of those nuances of an actual project. But this is just to give you a feel of what the process looks like. So yeah, effectively what we want to do is get to a release plan and share with us the number of sprints that we would take to build this, a solution end to end based on the scope that will be shared. So what are the different factors at play here? The number of engineers that we have, we've already talked about the scope on a high level and the requirements for the team. And we have discussed and finalized that we'll need 3 engineers in their team to work with us. There's also sprint delivery that we are planning to do. Each sprint is 2 weeks long. And we did a raw velocity calculation, which is effectively an exercise that we do during our inception and discovery to play around, where we get a few developers and we just do mock sprints with them. We tell them to fill up a sprint and see how many hiding the story point, of course, and then we reveal what is the amount of story points they think that they can complete in a sprint, and we take a few hypothetical sprints and take an average of that. So based on that exercise, we have identified that it's 30 points. That means the team together can deliver 30 points if they are working at total capacity. So that's the problem statement you folks have. And now it's time to divide you all into groups and then share the different product cards and story cards that we have. So maybe you can be one of the people in team A. Let's call them team A and team B. Would you like to be the BA of this team? So with him, you can join. Yeah. No, with him. Yes. So I think we can just simply split it. Yeah, you can be because I want BAs in both the teams. One of you.
I'm from the digital marketing team.
Digital marketing.
Exploring the new stream, so
Okay.
I'm not from the BA side. I am from the BA side, but I would do like.
That's okay. That's totally fine. I think
She's
you'll
into
work.
consulting. Yeah,
That's
right now I'm consultant.
okay. Yeah, that works. So you can move here and then we can just split the team like this. So it can be 4 people and then we have 5 people like this. So yeah, you all can come here and I'll hand this over to you folks. These are a set of story cards which has on a very high level what are the different stories that you'll need to play to get it. So just assume that your this is your product backlog, this is the size of what you need to build, and also it is estimated. So you can just, what you need to do now is, can I get some help with the board, folks? Can we turn that one as well? Yeah. Right, so you need to work together as a team. Who all are there in this team? You can be the tech lead. We have a QE and we have a dev. This is a perfect team. Show your come. Yes. आप लोग, you two, three, four. Oh yeah, one can. So who are we missing in this? We have a tech lead. No, tech lead QE. Okay, it's fine. I think this is good. Chandra can probably play the role of a tech lead. Okay, so I'll give you all the second envelope. Here we go. And okay, so what we need to do is now just go through the cards that you have inside this and understand and understand the estimates, how they need to be sequenced, and then distribute them across the sprints. So for example, we've said that the total velocity for the team is 30 points. Right, so you can take the stickies that have say 10, 10 and 10 and then put it in the first sprint, second sprint, based on whatever you think is realistically possible. So that's a simple exercise. If you have any questions, let us know and we can help you. Yes, we do have stories which is added in this. Yes, so
This is our product backlog, right?
that's your product backlog. So you can remove it, see, and then just stick it. There are cello tapes here, double tapes, just feel free to use all of that. And discuss with your team while you do it. We'll give you about 10 minutes for this. So yeah, get started. Yeah, folks on the live stream can scan this QR code and you will also see the product backlog there. You can just request for access if this isn't working for the folks on the live stream. Sure, I'll provide access. We also have a very detailed product backlog that I'd created. This is just a very high level one, but if you want a detailed one, I can share that as well, more related to this use case. Yeah.
रिलेटेड फ्लो तो क्लब कर सकते हैं एक स्प्रिंट के अंदर कंप्लीट फीचर कैन बी कंप्लीटेड
Yes. And total reporting can be last में, then account manager is going to manage my account so that I can update my details.
बीच में हमें कुछ भी तो रखना होगा प्रॉपर थीम कुछ पहले
Just keep the bag here. Sorry.
हाँ पेमेंट जाता है ओके पेमेंट होने के बाद वी गो फॉर ऑर्डर ट्रैकिंग 10 10 15 यहाँ पे ज़्यादा हो सकता है ओके
मतलब 30 पॉइंट्स कर पाएंगे अपन 10 25 हो गया तो नहीं तो
तो
हाउ
ऐसे नहीं कर 25 इसमें हो रहा है लेकिन यहाँ पे अगर 35 हो गया तो 5
हाँ एक्चुअली डू दैट बट लेट्स ट्राई टू अकोमोडेट कि मतलब कैसे कैसे प्लान करेंगे इन दो स्प्रिंट्स राइट so that we are able to finish off the work.
आधा घंटा और
4 minutes is quite helpful
We are still at the very early stage. 3 rounds है total. They can tell them to start putting it. Volume? Volume चालू है क्या? So folks, do we want to start putting things in the sprint? They do have stickies. Sticky notes hai, but it's written to. Yeah, we can just use this. This shouldn't be a problem. Shall we start putting it on the board? Breaking it down with spreadsheet? Okay, sure. Yeah.
Because I make that thing in oak now. I started with like 4 developers working story point. Then I have to reshuffle to 32 so that the release could be smooth without a sprint.
But I think she is like he knows how to kind of capture all the release velocities and all those things. So we'll have another meetup on
Yes,
that
we will.
because
No,
that's
no, we'll
always
talk
the
about it.
complex, most complex thing.
Because if we assign 10 na, then those 10 will never be finished. Like if we assign 8, it could be like QA will be verified those 8 stories and we can close them in the sprint and they can be ready for UAT.
When we talk about velocity, we generally capture the definition of done, right?
Yeah.
The definition of done is with the QA work also getting
Yes.
finished.
So if we are defining 10,
हाँ अगर हाँ अगर इन्वेंट्री मैनेजमेंट डाला चेकआउट ऑप्शन डाला ये स्क्रीन में हो जाएगा चेकआउट होने के बाद ही वो पेमेंट कर पाएगा यहाँ पे 10 10 10 30 फिर रेस्ट
Cool. Let's put it. So about the sequencing, don't be too worried because we are not going to be talking a lot about prioritization or ordering of, like we are assuming that the stories are ordered in a specific manner. So that's fine. I think this is more in terms of, logically it should make sense, which I think it is making sense. Shall we start putting it on the board?
So number of pointers in the sprint is roughly okay, right? So that's not a
Correct. So that's based on the raw velocity we have calculated at the very start. Okay. Cool. So we have double tapes also. I'll get those tapes. Yeah, you can use this as well. Nee, I think we have a lot of tapes. Use as much, not a problem. Cool.
they have already defined if this will
कितना
be
टाइम लग रहा
So as a management, we don't have to worry about that.
Hmm.
We have already done the planning with the team.
Correct. The estimations just assume that we've done all the discussions about scope and everything, and we've come up with these estimates.
Putting third it should be like this.
हाँ sprints के point of view से करना है. We have to organize it in.
वो ठीक है आई अंडरस्टैंड कि एपिक वो कुछ स्टोरी पॉइंट्स यहाँ पे स्टार्ट कर हो गया लेकिन ये तो अगर पहले शुरू हो जाए तो ये दूसरे पे चलेगा.
Yes, let's start. Okay, our team A is already. Team A is already on top of things. Great.
Biggest challenge we are facing right now. Doesn't seem there would be anything right or wrong in this, right? I mean, it's based on the
Correct.
team's opinion, what they think.
Yes, yes, but there are a few factors which you will see how it impacts.
That also works.
Folks, let's just put it. We're running out of time.
That's what we do.
Half, half, 60 and 40.
60, 66 and 33.
Usually it's better. All right, I'm just going through your set of stickies here and how you all have planned for it, right? Sprint 1, building the product backlog, search and filter, shopping cart, which is a total of 30 story points is what it seems like. And then in sprint 2, inventory management, because without having an inventory management tool, you will not really know what the status of the stock is, and checkout. So I think the sequence is looking pretty good here. Then there's payments, order tracking, order history, which is exactly 30 points. And then the last sprint will have account management, analytics reporting. So you think you can complete this project in 4 sprints? So you folks think that you can complete this project in 4 sprints
No, at least the
effectively?
MVP will be ready, but
Right.
depending upon the defects, the resolution, or any of the edge cases,
Yep.
then at the time of testing, sprint 5 will be required just to make
Right.
sure that end-to-end flow and integration is done with the system.
Okay, okay.
Realistically, that's not possible because based on raw velocity, it's never accurate number.
Exactly. So let's see how we can modify the plan in a way that we bake in those factors as well. But this is a good first stab that you all have taken at release planning.
Will be done in 4.5 sprints, right?
Yes.
Not 3.5 sprints actually. 10 points were fine.
Yes, 3.5 sprints, effective. Yeah.
The idle time is the product launcher 5 hours in advance.
Okay. In 10 days, can we do that?
Everything is hypothetical, right? Right
Yes.
now.
Yes, yes. It is hypothetical. But based on the raw velocity, I see you all have filled out all the sprints, which is a good start. Let's see what the other team is doing. Hello, Team B. Where are we at?
We're just finishing it up. Cool. Done. हाँ तो ठीक है ना पांच स्टूडेंट्स हमने खत्म कर दिया मतलब we have a very aggressive team.
Those people are finishing it in 3.5 sprints.
Oh, is it?
Yes. So y'all are slow.
Oh, we are slow. Sorry for that.
Okay, what have we done? Account management. Do we think this is like a very important feature, account management, to begin with?
I mean, if
Why
there are
is
no
that?
users, then who's gonna buy?
So in a lot of places, right, today you can just go, click, select, buy without even having to sign in. So account management is usually not a part of MVP in things that are not very critical. Like obviously in banking and all, it's a different thing. But for this use case, you might not even need an account.
Yeah, I think MVP is something that we did not think about because
Yeah.
we thought the product backlog is there, so
Correct.
that is the priority.
Right.
But we did not prioritize it. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that was the part we
Correct.
missed. Yeah.
But that's okay because we are assuming that anything, any order of stories is okay. But you all are taking about 4.5 sprints to do this work. And I see that, is this like parallelization of work? Are you thinking you
A
can,
bit of it. So maybe because there were 15 points, so we thought 5 point of work can kind of come in
this
one
one?
iteration, and then so
Like 10
there's
can be
10
done here,
can be done,
5
5
can
can
be
be done
carried
here.
out here. Okay, so that's how you all have split,
Yeah.
and you've also parallelized. Like search filter and shopping cart can go on in parallel.
Yeah.
Was that the thought process?
Yep.
Okay,
And
that's really
maybe
good.
search filter is kind of dependent on product catalog. If you don't have a product catalog, you
You
won't be able
can't
to
really
search.
search, so that's why you have kept it in a linear manner, but other things are parallel. That's really great. Okay, good. I think a pretty good stab at it. You folks are almost there, except for the 3 factors that we're going to talk about. So let's get back to the presentation. And कुछ नहीं जल्दी कर, we are a very optimistic team. But okay, let's talk about, let's get back to our seats and talk about some of the things that I don't see being factored into this plan. Like, if we have 3 people in the team, not exactly. I'll go about it. So if we have 3 engineers in the team, do we think it all 3 engineers being ramped up day 1? Do you think they will be delivering 10 points starting first sprint? First of all, there are 2 questions, right? One is all 3 engineers, can they, or the entire team? Say for example, teams are usually bigger where you have 5 members, 8 members, depending upon the problem statement that we have at hand. So if there are 5 people or 8 people, do we think onboarding everybody on day 1 is going to be a good idea? No, right? Nobody really asked that question. We assume that yes, everybody is going to be billable and like on board from day 1.
So
Yeah.
generally we do sprint 0 where people are kind of building up that base. So
Correct.
sprint 1 can be thought of that. Thought as that.
No. So like we mentioned in the assumptions, it's a greenfield project. We are starting from scratch. We didn't really have a concept of sprint 0 here at least. But yes, that's something that we do follow where we usually focus on spikes, on setting things up, getting the right kind of accesses and also onboarding people. But in this case, we did not consider that. So yeah. But ramp up is one thing that nobody really questioned. We thought, okay, the team is on and we start delivering 30 points
We
in
assume
first
that the
sprint.
team is mature enough and
We are being
yes.
we are being very highly optimistic here. But okay, that is one point. Second is, nobody asked me if there are going to be public holidays, if there are going to be any planned leaves for the people. Usually, have you seen ever any team where there's not even one day of leave or public holiday, like being in
At
India where we
Fabric, we
have
don't
so
take
many?
leaves.
Yes, but in a lot of other countries, for clients, we do see that there are leaves happening. That's a big factor that goes into release planning as well, right? So I'd like to go about introducing the first factor, right, which is, okay, as the image explains, capacity does not necessarily equal head count. So if you have 3 engineers, does not mean that they are all going to be able to give the capacity which we have planned for, which is the max, right? So 3 engineers do not mean they are engineers who are going to be 3 engineers time is going to be available starting day 1. So that's something which is quite important to understand. So some of the factors that we talked about, I'll move to that and a few more that impact release plan and that needs to be considered when we are talking about capacity, right? So what do you think reduces real capacity? Availability of the team members, right? So we have planned leaves, we have sick leaves, and it's really important, even if upfront we don't really have an understanding of what their available leaves are, we should always factor in a percentage of unavailability when we are building a release plan. Given that there will be public holidays, there will be sick leaves, there's going to be planned leaves which people might not be, which they might not have planned already. So that's one big factor. Second is utilization. So people are not productive 100% time for the sprint. So there are times when people are in meetings, they have to attend workshops, they need to do some kind of self-learning, things like that. So there's also that utilization factor that comes in. interruption, of course. I'm sure every developer, every PM here knows what this is about. Somebody's leaving, somebody's onboarding, you need to spend time doing KTs, you need to build your organization, so you need to participate in interviews, stuff like that. So those are, I wouldn't call it interruptions, but those are some other additional factors which hamper the capacity and availability. And the last one obviously being team changes. Ramp up, ramp down is very, very important. Like I talked about, onboarding everybody on day one is the recipe for chaos. So we had done that in one of my earlier projects with another client in another company that I was working for. We had like 10 people joining the client and the project team on day one, and nobody really knew what to do. So it's really important that we slowly ramp things up. We set things up, set the right kind of foundations in place, and then keep getting people in as we go. So yeah, yes.
This problem statement, it
Yeah.
was like 0 to 1. So we really don't need new people to know what is there in the back. Like it's already a new development. So
Right.
we can start with 3 developers straight away.
Yes, Anuj.
Yeah, I'll take that. So this is something
Sure,
that
sure.
I've actually faced in real life as well. So what generally happens, even greenfield project, right? You are starting off a project, you come in with 3 to 5 developers, and you don't have that scaffolding or that structure ready yet, right? So initial of the time, there's only 1 or 2 people who are setting up that structures, and the rest of the team is still not onboarded yet, right? They're just waiting over there to kind of get the work to them, understand what the process is about. Again, discussions with BAs and other things to just understand what they need to do, right? And that is the amount of time that we generally don't kind of accommodate as part of our release planning, which is very important because your initial setup of that code base is, if you don't have it, you won't be able to kind of go at the pace that we think we would be able to do, right? Because that obviously kind of trickles down to add more, create more problems for the developers in terms of developing the stories, right? Because if you don't have a fixed structure, you won't be able to kind of work based on whatever your initial thought of that velocity was or story points was. I can
Correct.
think that payment integration is just 5 point of work for me, but again, 2 things that I don't realize is was as the other developers of the same capability or not. Do I have the structure to do it in 5 points? If I don't have that structure, I need to kind of build that structure up as well. So those are the points that we don't usually calculate. And
Also, otherwise, I'll keep fighting on the tools and the interfaces that we are designing. So maybe Bun is better for me, maybe NPM is better for someone else, and we'll just keep on doing that. So
yeah, spoken like a true developer.
Yeah. So I think usually what we try to do is set up a base so that other developers, especially who are juniors and who probably wouldn't be able to be up and running from day one if things are not set up, it's always good to have that infra, your repositories, your ways of working, all of that established, so that when they join in, things are already set up and they can just get on with the work and the stories that are assigned to them. So yeah, a gradual ramp up is always advised over the one time ramp up at the start of the project.
And
So
I
yeah.
think the ramp down is also as important as that, because towards
Correct.
the end, you are done with the work, right? You don't
Yes.
need those many developers to kind of
Exactly. Yep.
do the work.
Like, would you want to have all 3 developers till last date, even if you're just fixing some kind of deployment issue or something like that? No, obviously, right? So I think gradual ramp down is also important. So learning about when people join your team at what different points and how do they gradually ramp down, I think those are some very critical things to sort of note. But thanks for answering that question. I think that was spot on. Thanks, Advay, for contributing as well. Cool. So now, activity round 2. We don't have a lot of these rounds. This one is going to be, just to see how we understand this impacts, right? So this is new information that is being released based on the capacity and availability information that we've received. So engineer A has 5 days leave planned, and engineer B is new to the code base. So they wouldn't be as productive since day one. They will take some time just ramping up, getting the context about the code repository as they go. So let's assume that their utilization has been reduced to half, and engineer C will be onboarded from sprint 2 because, like I said, we will be gradually ramping people up. Um, I think one more thing that you were making, right, about usually what you have seen is that if the velocity, raw velocity has been say 30 points, it is never usually 30 points. There's always that 10% or 15% gap that we see. So yeah, we do keep that utilization factor in mind whenever we build release plans in Fabric, and that typically goes between 80 to 90% per sprint. So yeah, with this information, can you just reshuffle some of the things?
I'm
Yeah.
not sure why are we not considering QA efforts in there?
Yes.
Somebody has to test.
Very good point. QA efforts are technically baked into the story efforts itself. So when you are developing a story, you should be thinking about building it end to end. So right from analysis, what is the effort that goes into that, all the way till it is tested on a stable environment. So that effort, complexity is baked, should be baked into the story estimate. So we are making that assumption. That's a great call out. Thanks for calling that. I actually forgot to mention it, but that's already baked into the story points
But
in
there's
this case.
also definition of story if we are debating about it. So
DOR,
we might
yes.
need a larger discussion.
Correct. Definition of done and definition of ready. I think some of you folks might be familiar with these terms. Cool. So do one of you want to just come and shift these stickies on the board to see how it will now span from 4, 6 to let's see how many? Let's quickly do it. Okay, come, come. Everybody can come. That's totally fine.
Okay, I have a question over here.
Yeah.
Since engineer A, B, C, may I know the seniority level? May I know the, is it like they are completely new to the system or they have the background of good coding before?
So let's assume engineer A is a lead software engineer who has worked with a lot of these similar projects in the past. Engineer B is a senior engineer who is not a lead, who doesn't understand everything but is experienced and good enough to work and collaborate with the lead. And engineer C is a consultant level engineer. Yeah, let's assume that. So yeah, think about how the velocity of the team will change. In sprint 1, what will it be now? So it's like 5 days gone from the sprint for the leaves. Hmm. So we had considered 30 points. Okay. So now can I get the marker? Let's write it down. So we had said 30 points. Now let's consider that this is man days. Story points, there are a lot of different ways on estimating story points, but for now, for the simplicity of it, let's consider those are man days. Now in this, what we are saying is 5 days for the senior dev is on leave, and the first engineer B, who's a senior engineer, is ramping up still, so their velocity is also going to reduce. Now given that one person is able to deliver 10 points in a sprint, let's say that engineer B is able to deliver half of that, which is 5 again, right? And then the last one is correct. So this one is not 30, this is actually minus 10, so that will give me how many points? That's going to give me 10. 10, 10, 20 is reduced, right? So 10. Only 10 story points worth of work can be done in sprint 1. And sprint 2, similar thing, right? 30 is the, so let's say 30 is the number of story points here. So second person is onboarding, right? So let's say that 5 points is gone because 1 week they'll take to at least ramp up. Your other two developers are delivering 100%, but there's a utilization factor, right? So let's consider that there is 25 points worth of work that they can do, but multiply this by 0.8, right? Because that's 80%. So let me calculate that for you and tell you. That's around 20 points. So that's 20 points. And then sprint 3 onwards is just going to be 30 times 0.8, which will be 24, 24, 24, 24. Let's assume. I think it's okay. हम वो क्या होगा उस पे ज़्यादा नहीं फोकस करते हैं, like that's okay, let's assume कि it's mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And 73 onwards 24, yeah, 24 all the way, because I'm taking 80% utilization across sprints, so that's,
But you also said they will be random.
yeah, that's okay. Like,
No, I was just thinking कि थोड़ा अपना ना ऐसे जाएगा 12 days.
that's right. That is right.
25 होगा. So
But we don't have so much space on the
here
board.
I was thinking even 36, maybe 36, and then it will be divided again. So
Yeah, you could do that actually. Let's just make that assumption that you probably have onboarded one more person. That will make it 36.
So sprint one we have one person. Sprint two we have two people. Sprint three, then four we have three people.
Yeah.
And then two one again.
Yes, that's pretty good. A much better release plan. What are we doing here, folks? I think we don't need to be too fixated on the order, the correctness of the order. I think it is more about filling the capacity here, assuming that it's
It's like we cannot like do something which is like cannot be done
before something.
before something. Like my QA have also worked in the backend.
Hmm. Yeah, but I'm saying like for the purposes of this, we can assume that it's okay. Correct. I think what is important that I was just telling them, right? I'll probably write it down. Sorry. So we had initially said there's going to be a 30-point velocity, right? But in sprint one, what happens is we learned that one developer is going to be on leave for 5 days. Let's consider that 30 points is man days in this case to make things simple. And then we said the second engineer is still ramping up. Let's say their productivity is going to be divided by 50, right? It's going to be half. So that means if a person is working in 2 sprints, their delivery is 10, divide by 2 is going to be 5. So they'll also be able to deliver 5. And the third person is not there in the team at all because engineer C is joining from sprint 2. So you'll minus 10. How many points are we left with? We're left with 10. Right. Correct. No, that's
We can
25.
make it further. Developer like like 10. If developer A gone here for 5 days, it will be like the project itself will start like 5 days ahead.
sprint 3 पे ही जा रहा
Sprint
है.
3 पे ले जाओ.
Acha, you all are assuming that.
Assuming, हाँ.
Yeah, but this use case is like he's going on leave in sprint 1. That's okay. We're making difference, but that's fine. I think what's important is that you all understand the concept. Now, second one, right? This is slightly different. We are saying that there's one person ramping up, right? So developer A will deliver total 10 points. Developer B is ramping up, so let's say is able to deliver 5 points. And third developer is also
He's onboarded from sprint 2.
yes, so the onboarded one is 5 and the other two are 10, 10. So that's 25. But we also talked about utilization factor. What if there's sick leave, something like that? Then we have to multiply that by 0.8, which is only considering 80% capacity, which leads to 20. So yeah, 20. And then if we consider sprint 3 onwards, that's like 30 points in total because we don't have any planned leaves and all. But we multiply that by 0.8, which gives me 24 because I'm considering the utilization factor. So that's it, like it's going to be 24, 24 here on, like that. And that's how your release plan. So initially, if you would have thought that you will take 5 sprints, now clearly you can see how adding the utilization factor and availability is making your release plan go beyond 6 sprints.
Accommodate for unplanned leaves.
Yeah, so that's the utilization factor. That's the 20%. Cool. You have any? Yes, you have any
That
doubts?
actually happens with daily like working on every sprint, like 20. It's never like however the experience candidate is, they may go 12, but the other person can go 6 in a complete day. So the
Correct.
overall remains 0.8. And if somebody leaves, then 20, 30 becomes 29
Hmm.
into 0.8. So that will be like my
Correct. Yeah. Yes. I think based on what you know about the team and the scope, right? You make those assumptions. It's typically between 80 to 90. Some people take it 70 to 90 because it's also about the uncertainty. if you don't understand the scope, you'll bake in more buffer. But that is a different buffer that you add, not the
This is just the utilization factor. This is without
purely
the buffer part of it.
correct.
Like you may also have some sort of dependencies on the payment gateway integration
Hmm.
or things like that.
To be very frank, like if I go with the, like as a technical lead, if I go for this, I will say like 10, 20, 24, 24. Like I will assume 24 as an overall, and I will convey 20, 30 points to the management.
Mhm.
Like
Yes. Yes, correct.
because I don't want it to be delayed because with
Yeah.
20 also it's going to be delayed.
Yes.
And there are so many things that happens and team and especially about like somebody offboarding
Yeah.
from the project that could be like tricky.
Yeah, and then you have to consider. So you have to adjust, right? Like in this sprint, maybe I have somebody leaving. So the cost of how much velocity do I need to reduce in that sprint, and what's going to be the KT transfer and all of that, right? So even if somebody new is joining, what's going to be the time of their amp? So all those factors have to be baked in when you're doing this. But this is again on a high level. This is how you sort of calculate it. This I hope gives like a glimpse. Cool. All right. Yeah. Yes. Great. I thought you all were done 5 minutes back. When I came, I was already happy. Great stuff. But yeah, I think.
Optimistic versus pessimistic.
But yeah, now you see how your release plan of 3.5 sprints now has directly gone to 6 sprints, just considering the utilization factor. Yes. So, quite interesting. All right, folks. Thank you so much. This is great. Our team D is quite invested in this problem statement. Thanks, folks. Can I just can I hear a few learnings from this group? Like what changed for you after learning this new information, just on a very high level? Yeah, go on. Can you pass the mic, please?
I think first one assumption that I did while doing this exercise, right, was ki, since we are underachieving in sprint one, which was the case anyways, so I was like, we should overachieve also somewhere. I don't think that was a good idea anyways. Like we discussed with the team, and then I realized, yeah, it is always better to run at 80% of the availability capacity,
Correct.
and then rather than going like 150% of which I was planning to do for that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it is always better to maybe underestimate at times
Correct.
than overestimating, because that maybe gives some more confidence as well that we can achieve and
For
will not
sure.
be any problem.
I think the same point even you were making, right? About how you should build pessimistic plans.
Again, I think it's not really underestimating, it's being more realistic in terms of,
Yep.
how much we would be really be
And
able to achieve.
accounting for
Yeah.
uncertainties.
And
Yep.
obviously, as a team, we can have our stretch goals at some point of time, right? We can obviously target, let's try to do 28 points, but that does not bake in as part of your release plan.
Yep.
Because release plan is something that is kind of provided to stakeholders and every other individual. So from the release plan perspective, from plan perspective, we need to be very realistic, right? As a team, we can have our own, stretch goals and goals in ourselves, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So one thing that I learned was while estimating for a sprint rate, number of stories that you can cover, you need to be very realistic in terms of the capacity that you have. I mean, we consider the part of the capacity like 80% of the person's capacity. For a new person, we consider around 50% of his capacity. Those kind of things are something which gives you a realistic number, a more realistic number.
Yeah.
But again, spillovers are not a bad thing. I would say. Basically, as a team, on top of that part, right? The point Andrew added, that you need to be realistic. You can plan to be realistic and target for some numbers, but you can always give a moonshot as well.
Yep.
I mean, why not? You target for some higher number, you end up spilling up few pointers, and that's okay as a team.
And honestly, what I, in my personal experience, have noticed over a period of time, it averages out. So in some sprints, like Chandra was mentioning, right, you overachieve. In some, you under deliver based on like whatever you had planned. But over a period of time, it averages if your basics are right. So yeah, now those are some really great points and sharings. I'm glad that you all got a glimpse at least of how really capacity planning changes the course of your delivery plan. Like because initially I remember team A had thought that they will deliver the whole MVP by perfect, perfect, no gaps, 3.5 sprints. And then we learned that, with these factors baked in, just one factor baked in actually, it's going to about 6 sprints. So that's what happens in reality. Cool. I think another thing that I want to see, which some of you bought out while we were talking about release planning, is oh, wait, what if my auth server is not set up? What if my APIs are not ready that I need to consume? All of those are termed as dependencies, right? So, all of this plans, while it talks about functional features, it doesn't talk about anything else that a feature delivery depends upon. Like, do we have the auth server ready for me to build my login? Maybe not, right? And when is that going to be ready? Till it's not ready, I can't really build my login page or user authentication, for instance. For payment, do I have the payment integration sandbox environment available for testing? If not, can I really build that? Can I launch without testing it and staging? No. So I think all of this plan will shuffle even more when you add those dependencies. Like for instance, let's say um, where is our payment? Yeah, let's say that payment was planned for sprint 3, but we are getting the sandbox only by sprint 4. My payment will have to go to sprint 5, right? So that is another way in which your sprint plan sort of changes and the timeline increases. So rather than 6 sprints, you will probably see that it becomes 8 sprints now with those dependencies baked in. So yeah, I'd like to, yes, Anuj, go ahead.
Suppose if I'm moving a plan, right? I'm moving away from my release plan and moving it to a later stage. There's a gap in that particular sprint, right? Because say I want to do 24 points, but my 10 points worth of effort is moving to sprint 4 now. How do I accommodate for something? And again, based on the dependency, I may not have anything to work in sprint 3 because some of the things that I planned in the later sprints may be dependent on the work that I'm doing in sprint 3. How do I kind of handle those?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I want to kind of give free time to developers?
I think
Okay,
you're trying
maybe
to probably
maybe we
answer.
can suppose if any of the engineer is free or has a leisure time, then maybe it's a time to retrospect the code quality and do the refactoring things.
That's a
So
great point.
yeah, this is one
Addressing
of the,
tech debts.
yeah, maybe clear the technical debt
Yeah,
or maybe do the refactoring or check the quality of the code at what we can do and what we can not. So
that's a great input coming from a BA. I'm actually surprised, but really, that's great. But your answer lies actually in the exercise that you folks did.
Yeah.
Some time back, you told me, right, that we are parallelizing things that are not dependent on each other. Usually, in a backlog where you have a lot of requirements coming in, you will always find things to do in parallel. So you need to find what are those items that they may not be as high priority, but those are buffers that you get to give like aha moments, build something which is maybe just um, giving the customer a feeling of happiness or something of that sort, which doesn't necessarily translate into measurable outcomes or business impact. But yeah, those are things that can be parallelized and worked upon, and
Like
tech debts
having a
is another.
confetti blast at the end of,
Yes,
purchase or something like that.
that makes me happy.
Yeah.
So some of those things and what he mentioned, right, as well. So great, great stuff. I think you folks are asking questions and answering them yourselves. So that's making it easier for me. All right. Cool. With that, I'll now move on to introducing factor number 2, which we have talked about and already discussed in a little bit of depth, right? So dependencies, which is another factor which derails your um, release plan, right? So sometimes your code is ready, but the world just isn't. You're probably ready with the concept of your payment pages, but like I said, taking the same example, what if your payment integration is not ready, or you're not able to have the right sandbox environment which you'll be using to test it in a lower environment, right? So if those things are not ready, then truly you can't really build the feature. So some of the other types of dependencies we see in the world are One we've already talked about technical. Second is teams. So in a lot of teams, we don't have a DevOps, capability built into the team itself. In that case, for example, clients have their dedicated DevOps or infra teams. We rely on them to help us with DB setups, infra setups, right? That's one very big dependency that we get derailed because of in a lot of cases. Business changes. So there's approvals that we need to do. We need to prepare business readiness documents for review, stuff like that. So again, it all depends on the nature of the product that we are building and also the client requirements. In some of the very high compliant requirements or products, what I've seen is there are mandatory compliance restrictions that we need to sort of work towards, and that also derails some of those things. So if we can uncover these things at the very start while building a release plan, it just helps us build a more realistic one.
And also, I would like to add on,
Yeah.
there is also a delay from the mobile side. For example, if we have a product of the mobile application like iOS and Android, then taking the approval from the Google and from the Apple side, it takes a long because they have to, means we as a business go to them and we say that okay, this is the release in our application and this is the bug fixes and all. But they have to check it from their own end and they have to give the approval that okay, is it with their own compliance team or not. So that is
Correct.
also one of the major factor.
Yep. In a lot of teams, like I said, right, there are different restrictions or there are different kinds of checks you need to do, which we usually know at the very start, but we just don't know how to factor it into the release plan. So that's how you do, like you create, like how you're creating story cards, you also create dependencies in your backlog and estimate them if there's work that you need to put in. And just have it, ordered on your sprint by sprint plan or on your release plan when you're building one. The last thing is external parties. So payment gateway, I think we talked about. There's also vendor teams sometimes you need to work with. In that case, what's their speed? How will they? Because if, say for example, you are an API aggregator and you need to work with a lot of different teams, then in that case, if your input depends on the output of other teams, what's the output like? What does that plan look like, right? And how do we shuffle our tasks or items in the whole plan to sort of sync in the order in which they are delivering? So I think those are some very important factors as well. Cool. Moving on to, okay, I think there was a glimpse of what the last factor is. The last and final factor that I just want to talk about, right, which some of you mentioned, I think Shoaib mentioned or Chandra also said that, okay, we'll leave the last sprint and a few points that are remaining here to fill up the capacity for production readiness, right? So my question is, if you just develop the product, right, it's working, everything's fine, and in staging you see that it's functioning very, very well. But is it of any worth if the users can't actually use it? No, right? There's no point of building that. So till we can actually ship it in a form that is ready, be usable by our users, the product does not hold any value. And that's the most important bit which people don't, bake into the plan at all. So we just said that, okay, now we'll take 6 sprints. And we just gave it very little importance that, yeah, maybe a little bit time in sprint 6 we will spend on testing or release readiness activities. But there are so many factors to that. If we think about a commercial product, there's so many factors that come into play there. So that's the last factor. I'd like to quickly talk about that. So yes, I hope this sticks because of the meme here. But yeah, I think the same question, right? We cannot call a software complete till our consumers cannot access it or use it efficiently. So nobody is going to say that, yeah, you did a very good job just because my Jira board or Jira card say it's done. So yeah, let's see what are some of the things that might happen.
In fact,
Yes.
I would like to know how many of us has tested on production. Like, I'm
Have
guilty
we?
of that. So
It's okay, be honest. Okay, I see a lot of hands raised, which is worrisome. Okay, cool. So yeah, I think what are some of the third, which I deem as very critical set of factors is, how do you ensure that your quality is right? So whether you're doing the right user acceptance testing. So this is like, I think a lot of QE engineers here in the room, right? So you know that it's so important to get your actual users, give them a staging environment which replicates your prod, before you go live. Test it, get the feedback, fix whatever is broken or what they think is missing in the system, and then go live with it, right? So quality has a lot of aspects to it. UAT is one, getting a regression suite build is another, to verify all your flows are working, stuff like that. I see you smiling. Do you have any inputs to add?
Actually, I have a very funny story about that production release. It's like
Ah,
we sit with the DevOps team as a developers and we roll the feature if something breaks. Like, okay, like it's a bank, it's not operative in the night, but
right.
it's like we are like testing in the night time, and they are like DevOps developer. Something breaks, developer putting it.
Oh my god, that's
That is
insane.
like this thing is like quality. Okay, QA is nowhere at that point of time.
My god,
Nobody considers skill.
that's a
And
really scary
yeah, we already
situation.
have the security on build X,
Yeah.
but we are doing build X dot 0, dot 1, dot 2, dot 3, and then we have a code freeze there.
Oh,
I think
on
I should share
production.
my resume with him.
Yes, please talk to show him. He'll help you with quality. All right, this is great. But yeah, quality is very, very important. Please do not do the mistake of this, which is testing in production when things could go totally haywire. I have a very serious incident that happened once. Like there was a developer who didn't really understand that he had access to the production instance of a database, went and just deleted something, and then the user is not able to access their own flows, their own journey, and he realized later that he was actually granted access to production instance by mistake, of course, because that's not something that we do. But yeah, it takes a hit on company's reputation, and a lot of things could go wrong. So that's not advised, and that's why before we release, we need to assess quality, we need to assess the readiness of the application. um, so yeah, I think that's one aspect. The other one is operations. So this also, nobody really talked about this, right? But given that we are releasing an application in production, what could potentially go wrong? If something goes wrong, how do we know that it's gone wrong, right? Like if we are not recording the logs, if we are not generating alerts on any of the issues that a user, like they could be experiencing a 5xx on every request that they are making. Suddenly you don't know what's happening, you're getting a lot of emails. But if you have an alert system and the right kind of monitoring built in place, you might be alerted the second time it happens, and you have a support kind of a hierarchy or model built to take action if that happens, right? So I think building the right monitoring, alerting dashboards and mechanisms is very, very important before we go live. Business readiness, right? Training the people, like how to use the system, what are the different features that we have in place. Like one example of Spotify, I don't know if you folks know, but there was an application feature that they launched, which is when you're running, they will start playing songs based on the rhythm of your activity that you're doing. Did you folks know that that was a Spotify feature? Right? So I think people were not really told about it. We didn't know. They didn't even know that there's a feature like that. So I think it's important that the users of your product, they have the right kind of training, and they are onboarded in a way that they understand how the system works. And of course, the release processes. I'm sure every one of you here might have heard about deployment windows, booking it in advance, and making sure that the right people are there in it and stuff like that. So yeah, and also defining a rollback strategy just in case your release fails. So all this has to be done. Typically, I think in my experience, it's been around 2 to sometimes 8 weeks. It takes that much time to only set things up so that they can be deployed in production. So yeah, I think very important. So that actually, let's even assume there are 2 sprints after this. It's taking your plan to 8 sprints now, and initially we had thought 3.5 sprints. Wow, we are done. Yeah.
We are not saying the release or the deployment production only happens at the end of sprint 6 or something. Because ideally, if you see, it would happen in slices.
Mm-hmm.
It would happen in slices, and probably after sprint 2, if a sizable chunk is ready, the deployment should happen at that point itself.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
you have much more time to be ready in production than going after the whole sprints.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like if your initial sliver of features is ready, you still need to fit in that time, right? So I'm assuming that that's going to be 2 weeks. That's just adding 2 weeks to your plan. in total. But that's a great point, and yes.
But I actually like the releases is like sprint wise also. Like it depends on the release cycle we follow.
Correct.
So if I'm developing feature A in like 2 sprints, then that feature can be testable in like UAT type of environment, not the development environment. It will be like the UAT, which is a bit more stable. So it could be like by fourth sprint I'm doing FNF, and by fifth sprint I could be ready to production.
Yeah, I think it depends on what do you think is releasable, right? You need to understand whether we are bringing any value, we're solving any problem. Like say for example, by Sprint 2, you've only set up your DB, you've only set up your application code, and there's only a welcome page or home page, right? Like, is it even worth releasing?
No,
So,
my point was like we are doing in this, it is like a discipline we are setting up
yeah,
with the particular release cycles. And if I'm saying like, okay, my login page is only available at like sprint 1 end,
yeah,
at least by sprint 3, I know my login page is stable
right, yep,
because I have done through UAT and FNF.
that's
Maybe
true.
I'm not releasing it to the production, maybe I'm not releasing it to the public.
Yep,
Maybe I'm rolling it to my domain only because
correct,
until I'm announcing it, it's not, people is not
live,
going to live to
correct,
get it.
yep,
So it is something like that we can do as a part of sanity and
yep.
sanitization over the production releases.
That's very right. And I think what you're talking about is definition of ready in
Yeah.
our language, right? So when do we say this feature is ready? When it has gone through a cycle of testing, when it's been, probably validated across all the edge cases, stuff like that. So that's definition of ready. But I think another question to ask on top of that is whether it is going to be usable by the clients, right? So maybe we release it in production, but we toggle it off, or we don't launch that. So I think those are
Yeah, FNF is like for clients, like client only. Like they
correct.
can do the testing, like not testing, like onboarding in the production environment only.
Granting access to certain people,
Yeah.
not launching it to public.
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
you talking about pilot run?
FNF like we do beta releases.
Pardon?
Beta.
Is it like means the actual
pilot run is the same.
pilot?
It is pilot release. It's like you're launching it not to the wider audience, only to a limited set of people
That is like
to
beta
validate
saying, talking
to
about.
validate whether it's working well or not. I think we did that in one of the last projects that we did
Yeah,
do.
Kendra department. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, correct. No, that's a great point, right? And I think it's important that you keep launching a sizable chunk that can be tested, validated, and then once you have a sizable set of features, which is also it's meeting your DOR, then you set like your release date and then work towards that. So yep, great inputs, everyone. I think with that, all our factors are complete. And I think we've talked about a lot of different factors that could also impact release plan, which we didn't talk about in detail, and it's not a part of the 3 factors. But I'm sure some of you said that at the very start, right? So scope changes, environment instability, stakeholder delays. I think Anuj mentioned stakeholder alignment is not it doesn't happen in a few projects at the very start, which is another big factor why we see a lot of delays, right? So one way to sort of deal with it is um, aligning on a ways of working workshop. So you just organize all the right people in the same room and you talk about accountability. Like you from client side, this is your role, do you agree? And these are the kind of things that we think you should do you agree? So it's like a collaboration and alignment with the clients to sort of solidify the roles and define accountability, right? So there are no delays when it comes to that because now we've identified that one person who will approve all of the things from process side, who will probably approve the ACs on the story cards, things like that. So very, very important whenever we kickstart a project, there should be a ways of working workshop that we should do with the client, something which could be another meetup topic. But yeah, and a few other things, right? Compliance, somebody mentioned, budget restrictions. If we feel that there's suddenly, the client wants to cut down the team and the resources because of, some shift in the organization, which actually happens a lot more than we, think. So in a lot of projects, I have seen that suddenly the client wants to ramp the team down because, one, they couldn't see a lot of value, or second, there are organization shifts in their company. So yeah, clear ownership. I think it ties back with the stakeholder misalignment that we talked about earlier. So some of the other factors here. But yeah, I think with that, I'd just like to end. I think we had a very engaging workshop. Everybody here has shared very valuable insights, and I'm sure you folks have also seen in action how the release plans actually are shifting. What are some of the key factors that go into it? So yeah, I think these are just some takeaways that I have added, which we did derive out of the session. And hopefully this helps when you're doing your own next inception, or when you're pairing with your delivery leads, project managers, business analysts on creating a release plan. So cool. I think with that, I'd like to let you folks take a moment to share feedback on the meetup that we had organized, and let us know what went well, what could be something we could potentially improve upon. And yeah, hopefully we keep organizing more of these and see you folks there. Thank you so much.
I have one
Yeah.
question. Is
Go
the
ahead.
release cycle or release plan for the year is fixed or it is random?
It totally depends on a lot of factors, right? One is what is the client's expectation. So if the client has a certain fixed window in mind, like they want to release in 3 months, then how do you work around that? What is the scope that you define around that, right? And also based on amount of time it's going to take for you to develop a feature, even if it's the bare minimum. So I think it depends on that, like the scope of work, the requirements that the client has, but we try to do incremental releases as much as possible. Like, ideally every 2 sprints or even every 1 sprint, if we can release something slowly, I think that is really, I would say, advised. But at the very start, right, I think till you don't have an MVP, is it worth releasing to the public? Of course, you can release to production, have it canary tested like we were talking about. But to the customers, I think that initial MVP that you need to launch, that's something that requires collaboration. But yeah, once you are in the cycle of releasing frequently, we do really recommend that we do it in continuous increments of 2 weeks, 2 sprints, like based on whatever works for the team.
Because every year we get the release calendar from the bank, that okay, this is how we are going to release this. This is the period for DR activity and also. So I just,
Correct. So someone has done that, right? That's planning. That's release planning already. The output of that is.
every year across all the banking application, across to each and every banking member, we get the calendar like from starting from Jan to December. In this month, we are going to have the DR activity, and in this month, we are planning for holiday month. So
Correct, like code freeze or
yes.
things like that. Yeah, a lot of banks do that. They also have points when they don't allow you to deploy anything. So you need to take those factors also into consideration. That's like a great call out.
So one thing you want to go on?
Go
So
ahead.
one thing, right? Uh, in raw velocity, do you really factor in the QA efforts as well? Because in a lot of teams, right, what I've seen, um, uh, the velocity is all about the dev efforts, basically. If the story is getting developed or not. Why go elsewhere? Right now in my team, that's the fact.
Oh,
You only consider dev efforts as velocity,
yeah.
and most of the time the teams are understaffed in terms of QAs, the ratio of QA to dev.
Yeah.
So that eventually creates bottlenecks, right?
Correct.
So devs are delivering, churning out a lot of stories, but the testing is not happening, right? So it creates a bottleneck there. How do you factor in that in release plans?
So there are two things, right? One is that if the team is mature, they understand that quality is important, needs to be baked into the estimates that we are giving. That comes from defining a solid DOD. So if you have the right definition of ready defined, then in that we do say that it has to be deployed to staging and it has to be sanity tested, or maybe even automation, flow written for that. If that is there, you'll already have a team that understands that the estimates need to go into the stories while we are estimating them. And I feel like a lot of senior developers or engineers do understand that. But in case where you might not have that baked into the efforts, then you also take in like 10 or 20% buffer, additional buffer to track the testing efforts. But that's usually, I would say, is an anti-pattern, because that gives you the impression of testing only happens at the end, which is not something that we recommend at all. Testing has to be embedded in all stages of your delivery, right? Right from adding unit tests to code bases and then to automated tests right before release.
And sometimes you also try to kind of do it, achieve it through processes, like bringing in test checks, right? So if a test check has passed, then only the story moves to a test stage or comes into the QA bucket, right? So test check kind of eliminates a lot of testing effort that is required to be done by QEs, and QEs can majorly focus on the exploratory part of it, so that you're making sure that all the all the acceptance criteria of that particular story is being tested by the developer itself before the story even moves to the QA environment.
Yeah.
That is one of the best methods, in my opinion, to kind of put the accountability back onto the developers and say, because you are supposed to kind of fulfill these criteria. Are you doing that?
Correct.
Right? You cannot just give the story back to the QEs just because you feel that it's completed. It should meet the acceptance criteria. Then only the QEs would start testing.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I
the
mean,
feedback loop reduces, right? That's so important. Like the context is still fresh with the devs, and the feedback, is loop is not happening after, few days after which the QA is tested, but immediately after the story has been, said to be done.
yeah, I mean, see, that's the ideal way. I agree. Perfect. I mean, that's the way we do as well. Test checks. That's inherently something smaller teams do to avoid the feedback loop. But I'm trying to find answers for my own problem right now. See, so there are mathematical gaps from the word go. You have dev to QA ratio, which is like two QAs behind 88. Sorry, not 88 devs. So that kind of ratio is very difficult. And that's typically no eight devs. And that's so that's the kind of a typical situation in any kind of startups, smaller teams churning out a lot of dev stories, but QAs.
Yeah, but I think what misses in those teams is basically the accountability part of what the developer needs to do, right? Now, when you are going with that sort of ratio, the accountability of testing a story also is developer's responsibility, right? Because at some point of time, whenever a developer is kind of pushing a story, they cannot just be, like I am completed with my work. Now it's up to you whether you find bugs or
Yeah.
not, right? It should be a collective goal for
Correct.
the team to make sure that whatever stories are going in are free of bugs,
Yeah.
right? And that is where teams lack, where you have 8 developers and 2 QEs, and the responsibility of quality is just with the QEs.
Yeah, I think we have solved this problem for one of our very recent clients. We can share more on that while we grab our pizzas. But yeah, we can share. I think we have developed frameworks on how do we fix this, end to end.
Like in my last organization, there was like no QA actually. So and in development also, like we have like 100 developers working on a single Android project.
Yep.
So the main part is like we have automations at like whatever code we are doing,
Yep.
it should be like automated,
Hmm.
and it's like not just limited to a code or a logic that we are building. It's about developing UI test, developing integration test, and
Correct.
developing unit test. That is like core mandatory part
Yes.
before merging the code.
Yep.
So in Revolute that I'm working, I
Yep.
worked. It is like we don't have at all the QA part.
That is actually the way forward,
Yeah.
Like the devs need to understand how quality can be embedded in all the layers of testing. And ideally, your testing should be like a pyramid, when you see different layers, no? Unit test should be the fattest layer. Integration test after that, there should be lesser number of contract tests and the least number of automated tests. So effectively, the onus of testing, right, is now distributed across all people, and especially within the team who's actually building the product. So they need to also take that responsibility that what we are giving out is not just stuff that we think is ready to be shipped, but it is actually validated, through a set of frameworks.
So like in Revolut only, like the code coverage part which we usually do, it's like 99%.
Yeah.
So it's
Wow.
drop between below that, it will be like your release is not
Not
going in.
acceptable. Yes, people use hooks for that. Your pipeline will not pass if it doesn't meet that
Yeah.
criteria. Yeah.
So sorry,
No
actually I
worries.
have a call at 8. So
Sure,
we
sure,
need
sure.
to
Yes.
prepare.
Yes, we are almost
Thank
done.
you.
I think we are just talking about more stuff,
Please
experiences.
continue and thank you for the
Done.
session. It was
Thank you
really
so
nice.
much for coming. Yes. Dina. Cool. I think, folks, we are done. Feedback, something that, please take some time to share. And here's some hiring opportunities within Fabric. So feel free to, just take a photo of this and visit these links. These are job descriptions on 2 roles that we are hiring. So we are looking for a native mobile developer with Kotlin experience. Oh, great! Send me your resume. It's in my team. And the other one is a lead or senior consultant automation quality engineer. So yes,
Kotlin is Android, right?
Yeah.
Kotlin. Actually,
Yeah, yeah, Kotlin is Android.
but we are not necessarily looking for just Android experience. If you have iOS experience as well, you can apply. We'll just assess based on our conversations with the candidate whether. Yes, yes, please just send it directly.
We can take one photo of the entire group. That
Yes,
will
let's do that. Yes, let's do that. Cool. So take photos of this, folks, and I'll leave it at this. You can reach out to Angela directly for any kind of queries on hiring. And yeah, with that, thank you so